So the cancer fighters in your kitchen. Now, one of the things I want to say is that, and let's see if I can get the bottom of my screen to do right here. So what are herbs and spices? So actually, herbs are the green part of a plant, the leaves of the plant that we use. So when you're talking about basil or sage or thyme or oregano, that's an herb. Spices come from all the other part of the plant. So roots like turmeric or garlic, or bark like cinnamon, the berries, all spices, a berry, the flowers, chamomile, you know, the seeds, pepper, you know, and many others, anise, are what we call spices. Garlic's in that category of spice too. So when we talk about the use of herbs and spices in a culinary sense, we're really using them for flavor and for their scent that's often imparted by the essential oil. When we talk about the use of herbs and spices for medicinal uses, we're usually talking about the other components of the plant. And, you know, herbs and spices are vegetables in a sense, vegetables and fruit, like everything else that we eat. And all of those things contain steroids and alkaloids and terpenes and polyphenols that we think the plants produce to ward off pests and predators that might attack them, that also help us, usually through the actions of anti-inflammation or antioxidant. Some of them rev up the detox systems in our liver. Some of them modulate our hormones that can help protect against cancer. Some of them have direct anti-cancer effects by arresting a cell cycle of cell growth. That's the anti-proliferative effects. That we know from test tube studies that if you drop some extracts of herbs and spices on cells, that they actually stop growing on cancer cells. The many herbs and spices can increase immune system activity, or they can have other direct anti-cancer effects by encouraging cell death. So in order to, I'm gonna actually get up and move here. You guys, I don't know if you guys will even be able to see this. So in order to kind of talk about that idea of, you know, why the difference between herbs and vegetables in general, I'm going to come in here and get ready to start cooking. Hang on just a second, and we're going to see if there's our cooking table there. So I'm going to start cooking this soup recipe, and the first thing I'm going to do is heat some oil in my pan here. And I'm actually in my dining room because my kitchen is too small to do these Zoom demonstrations. So I'm going to go ahead and put olive oil, and this is a good olive oil. I live in Ojai from the Ojai Olive Oil Company, and I think you should buy olive oil in small dark bottles because all oils can go rancid and that increases their free radical activity. So I don't think you should ever buy a giant metal can of olive oil from Costco and use it for a year. You should always buy small quantities like this. I'm feeling my pan to feel how heated up it is. Now, those of you who've been in my cooking classes before know that I'm lazy. I'm a lazy cook, and I think there might be a lot of lazy cooks out there with me. So I'm going to make this a really fast recipe by using already diced onions from Trader Joe's. One of these bags is equivalent to about 1.5 cups of onions, of an onion. It's a little bit less than 2 cups, actually. So now here's the question of, you know, why onion and garlic are in the same family. Why do we call garlic a spice and we don't call onion? It's kind of arbitrary. Part of the fact is that the essential oils in garlic are more concentrated, so the flavor is stronger, the flavor and the scent is stronger. I'm going to put my carrots in here too, and this is once again lazy use of already peeled little baby carrots from Trader Joe's. Because we use such a smaller amount of garlic, we tend to call it a spice, and we don't tend to call onions a spice, even though we're using it to flavor our food. But they're both from the same family, and some of the arbitrary difference is just how much we might use, so that we tend to call a vegetable because it is enough, we're using enough of it to contribute carbohydrates, fat and protein, calories maybe to our diet, whereas herbs and spices, we don't use enough to really contribute that way to it. So when people talk about, oh, this herb has this much vitamin in it, usually we don't eat enough to really, for that really to make a difference. So I'm going to let this cook now. And I've lost my, oh, here we go. I'm going to let that cook for a while. And I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. We'll see if I can do this fancy thing I'm going to try to do here, which is to go back and forth. So you might be able to hear that sauteing in the background. And let's see if I can learn to get this to advance here. There we go. So there's the recipe. So I've started with our onions, 2 cups of chopped onions and 2 cups of chopped carrots. And I'm going to let that saute until it softens. I know if I come over and stand next to my laptop, my voice will be better than when I'm over there cooking. And so I'm walking back and forth a little bit. So here's a tip for garlic. So the active ingredient, maybe the medicinal part of garlic, is a compound called allicin. And it is produced when another compound called that's a protein, allicin, comes in contact with an enzyme, allinase, produces the allicin that we think that, and many other compounds. You know, all these herbs and spices and all our vegetables and fruits that we eat are very complex products with lots of different constituents, but we think allicin is one of the major medicinal characters in garlic. So when you break those cells by mincing up garlic, you release the allinase enzyme that produces the allicin. So this garlic tip, chop and stop, is from another dietitian colleague of mine. Mince your garlic and let it sit for 10 minutes so you can get the allicin to form by the enzyme action. Now, when I cook, I'm almost always chopping and stopping because I'm answering the phone or dealing with some other things. So it's not a problem for me, but if you see in your life, if that's a problem. Garlic has, just like so many other herbs and spices and fruits and vegetables that we talk about, has anti-inflammatory and antioxidant capacity, and may also boost some of the detox systems in your liver as well. When we talk about the possible anti-cancer activities of garlic, most of the studies that use herbs and spices and look at anti-cancer activity almost always use very much more concentrated forms of these herbs and spices than we use when we are cooking in culinary sense. So I'm going to try to stick to that culinary sense. When we talk about herbs and spices and their beneficial effect on your system, when we use them in cooking and eating them as a vegetable in a sense, then we're talking about their properties as a tonic herb. So that's an herbalist term. A tonic is something that has a gentle action that supports the whole system. So supports healthy system in order to prevent disease and increase the general sense of wellness in the body. So most of these herbs and spices that we're going to use in cooking like this are going to have that more tonic action. That these things that you eat every day, and the more you eat, the more benefit you'll get. So the more herbs and spices you use in your cooking, the more benefits you'll get. They have more of a tonic action. We're not talking about using them as so much as pharmaceuticals, which is what a lot of people in cancer, how they want to use herbs and spices, is in that very concentrated form where it is more a drug. Now you have lost that sort of gentle action that decreases the side effects, but still gives you the beneficial effects. So in culinary medicine, we're talking about tonic herbs. There are a few studies with garlic that we could relate maybe to using it as a vegetable. There's a study in Chinese men with prostate cancer that those who ate the equivalent of a clove of garlic every day had less prostate cancer. Whoops, I don't want this to brown here. stir it up a little. And in looking at population studies, it looks like populations that eat garlic versus those that don't, or people that eat garlic versus those that don't, tend to have less prostate cancer. The evidence on colorectal cancer and looking at population studies, like who eats garlic, right, which is more like the tonic use of herbs in culinary cooking, the analyses are conflicting. If they include just observational studies, which are a little bit more powerful than case-controlled studies, they don't find a strong association. But if you include the case-control studies, they do find that populations that eat more garlic may have less colorectal cancer. And in using garlic as a medicinal, giving it, you could, as a medicinal, people use garlic and it's powdered, dry it, powder it, put it in capsules, or as an extract, which is either where you extract the active ingredients with water or with alcohol, or as an aged extract. So Kwai is the brand name of a powder, and Kyolic of an aged extract. So using a high dose extract, they did find that in people that had colonic adenomas, and adenomas are a precursor for colon cancer, that they could get about a 30% reduction in the recurrence of adenomas using a high dose extract. So that's not a culinary use, right? That is more a pharmaceutical use. And I think they did not find that in another study. I think this is interesting, again, where you look at it more as a vegetable, that in just looking at garlic, populations that ate more garlic did not necessarily have less breast cancer. But if you combine the analysis, if you said, who eats the most garlic and onions, right, from the same group, you found then that you did see a reduction in breast cancer. And then there's one study there, and that study looking at a better prognosis, less mortality, less death after gastric cancer with more garlic. Once again, that's using garlic extracts, right? And not just the culinary use of garlic. So now I'm going to see if I can make let's see how good I can do this here. And make my table big again. And so I've softened my onions and my carrots here. I don't want them to brown, actually. I just want them to soften. And now I'm going to put my garlic in, which I already chopped up, so you wouldn't have to sit through me chopping it up. And so definitely sat for 10 minutes or more to develop the allicin. So I'm putting the garlic in, and I certainly can smell it. I'm going to let that develop for a minute or so here. And then we're going to put all those beautiful spices in. Here we go with all of our spices. So I'm going to put cumin in, 1.5 teaspoons of cumin. And there's coriander. And then here's turmeric, which everybody just thinks is the cat's meow where cancer prevention is concerned. We've got turmeric in there. Cinnamon. And then some black pepper. So, oh, that smells so good. I hope somebody's cooking so they can smell it too. So we've got a lot of spices in there. And you can, I don't know if you can see, it's certainly taking on the yellow color of that turmeric, which, if you spill that, just taking out a big piece of onion there. I don't want it to stay in my dish. If you spill that turmeric on your counter, you've got to really scrub it to get it off because it has that color. So I've let that develop, that our wonderful smell of those herbs. So now that I've let that get fragrant, I'm going to add the broth in. So I'm just using vegetable broth from Trader Joe's. So this is going to certainly make a fast soup, right? Just going to to step off camera here for a second. So this calls for 6 cups of vegetable broth and 2 cups of water, thinking the vegetable broth will be quite strong. But this vegetable broth from Trader Joe is not that strong. So I'm going to just go ahead and use 2 cartons of it, which will be 8 cups. So I'm not going to have half a carton left over. Let me just make sure on my, I think I'm going to not quite go 8 cups because my pan's getting full here and I still have other things to put in it. So there's that beautiful golden broth there now because of the turmeric, and the beautiful red brown of the cinnamon and the cumin. So I'm going to put my other vegetables in it, my cauliflower. And once again, you know, cauliflower from the cabbage family, we're talking about herbs and spices. The cauliflower has some other active phytochemical ingredients called sulforaphanes, which rev up the detox systems in your liver, help to modulate estrogen levels in women with breast cancer. So there's our cauliflower. And I'm going to put in a can of diced tomatoes. I was trying to tip that up so you could see it. A can of diced tomatoes, 2 tablespoons of tomato paste just to deepen that umami flavor in our broth. A big deep soup kettle would certainly be more useful than my mom's shallow electric skillet here. Break up that tomato paste. And then I'm going to put lentils in from this vacuum pack from Trader Joe's of lentils. It comes in a pack. I've already taken them out and broken them up so that you all don't have to wait for me to do that. Let's see if this overloads my, if I get to the very tip top of my skillet here, I may be sorry. Oh, I just managed it. So there's our protein with our lentils. We've got carrots and cauliflower and carrots, of course. Interestingly, some of the herbs that we use are from the carrot family: parsley, dill, caraway, cilantro, all from the carrot family. Where many of our other herbs that we use are from the mint family, actually. Oregano's from the mint family, rosemary from the mint family. Many of our other green herbs are from the mint family. Okay, so I've got everything in there, I believe. Let me double check. I hope I don't need anything else because it's going to be too much. All right, so we're going to simmer this. And I'm going to leave the lid off of it so I can watch it a little. Okay, it's a little disconcerting that I can't hear from anybody. I'm so used to my smaller classes at CMH where people yell at me about things. All right. I mean, they don't yell at me, but they talk to me. So I'm going to go back to my PowerPoints. While we let that cook now, that's going to cook for 20 to 30 minutes until everything gets, whoops. I've got too many things over my controls here. There we go. So that's going to cook for 20 to 30 minutes. And if you're cooking along with me, then we're going to put in the spinach and the lemon juice, and you're going to have dinner tonight. And it's going to be loaded with cancer-fighting vegetables, the carrots and the cauliflower from the cabbage family, and all those spices, as well as the nice lentils. It's very low in fat, just a couple of teaspoons of olive oil in it. So it's going to be highly anti-cancer dish for you. So we just put all those spices in it. Let's talk about those spices a little. So we put turmeric in there. And as I said, turmeric seems to be everybody's darling, anti-cancer darling spice. Interestingly, if you look at the literature, there's very few human studies showing turmeric decreasing being used in the treatment of cancers. There are some case studies, a few studies being with turmeric, or the active ingredient in turmeric, which is curcumin, not to be confused with cumin, which we put in this, which is another spice. So curcumin is considered the active ingredient in turmeric, the golden spice there. There's been some studies adding that into some chemotherapy treatments, and so far most of them are looking just at whether or not there's interference or people can tolerate it, and not so many long-term studies with turmeric showing that people who take turmeric have lower progression or less recurrence after a cancer. Now that doesn't mean that that might not work, because turmeric, like so many of the other spices we talked about, have a lot of the properties that, you know, even small amounts over the long term can reduce inflammation, are antioxidants. So things that are antioxidant sort of protect the DNA from damage. Things that are anti-inflammatory decrease the inflammatory cytokines, which might irritate cancer cells and make them grow more and grow faster. And then they might have the specific anti-cancer effects, even in small amounts over the long term. When you mix turmeric with fat, we didn't have a lot of fat in our soup, but black pepper, which we did have, the curcumin is better absorbed. The bioavailability of curcumin is considered low. And, you know, there's been at least one study saying maybe that doesn't matter. You know, it seems, you know, people talk about that India, the subcontinent of India, has the highest turmeric intake. And in fact, you know, both Indian and Chinese herbal medicines, you know, have been around for thousands of years, have written records of it from both, from several thousand years ago. And turmeric, I think India, it consumes the most turmeric in the world. And people talk about, well, India's got less cancers, but that's a controversy. They do have a low rate of cancer in what they report. But just as we've seen in some of the information from the COVID reporting with India, it's a country, it's a huge country like the United States, not as rich as we are, so their reporting systems might not be as robust. So whether or not it's really true that they have lower cancer incidence per 100,000 population, we don't know. But some people use that in support of, hey, turmeric must be great as an anti-cancer agent. It has many of the properties that would be good, but human clinical trials are not very robust yet. So here's one way to take turmeric in a way that where you could take turmeric every day. Now you could eat turmeric every day by slicing turmeric root up and eating it. That's a ginger root there. There's the turmeric root right there. By slicing the root up and putting it in hot water to make tea. You can put turmeric powder or turmeric roots. Turmeric is not very strongly flavored. So in a smoothie, you can often get a quarter teaspoon or so of turmeric. It'll change the color, but it won't necessarily change the taste of it. Or here's another traditional Indian way to have turmeric, and that is in something that's called golden milk. Well, sort of like our hot cocoa, right? Where you put turmeric, and there's a kind of recipe there, and the recipe link is on the bottom of your slides, which I think Veronica sent out today. So you can make it with the root, or you can make it with the powders. Some people, you know, the recipe for golden milk is just like our recipes for spaghetti. You know, some people put this much garlic in it, some people put fennel, some people don't. It's the same for golden milk. Some golden milk recipes are just turmeric and milk and some sweetener. And this one uses ginger and cinnamon as well. And some also use cardamom and a pinch of black pepper to make the turmeric better absorbed. So in this sense, even though I don't have any population studies really to talk to you about where turmeric is concerned that would sort of relate to our culinary use of turmeric and whether or not that over the long term would be good for cancer, this idea, this drinking, that tonic effect, right? The long-term use of these herbs and spices in small amounts may be beneficial. And there are 2 studies looking at turmeric washes decreasing the mucositis, the mouth sores and the problems in people's mouth that they often get from radiation, when they have head and neck cancers. And so these mouthwashes have been shown to delay actually the incidence of mucositis. So maybe it doesn't show up at week 3, it shows up at week 5 so much. But even then, this is a couple of teaspoons and a half a cup of water 6 times a day, used as a mouthwash, swished around the mouth and spit out 6 times a day. So not so much our culinary use. There is one study looking at 40 patients with all different kinds of cancers, solid tumors, no leukemia or lymphoma patients here, taking 180 milligrams of a curcumin that was boosted to be more bioavailable, but the addition of because of the way it was processed, and you can also make it more bioavailable, like we just talked about, by putting it in an oil matrix and adding black pepper to it. So this was 180 milligrams a day of curcumin, and there's about 200 milligrams of curcumin in a teaspoon of turmeric. So if you could eat a teaspoon of turmeric every day in your cooking, you could achieve the same thing they were achieving with pills, maybe better quality of life there. We put some ginger in our golden milk there. We didn't put any in our soup here. But once again, one of the ways to use ginger as a tonic herb is to make a tea out of it. So same kind of thing as with turmeric, where you slice up the ginger root and put it in hot water. A lot of people put ginger in green tea. And of course, green tea has a lot of anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties as well. So ginger and green tea with a little sweetener is a double boost of antioxidant and anti-inflammatory capacity. The way that ginger has been used in cancer, its most well-supported, scientifically supported use is with chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting. And some of the studies with ginger, the studies with ginger are not all positive. There are some studies that show that it works for chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting, and I have a lot of people who tell me that they were on medicines to prevent nausea and vomiting, and when they added ginger tea into it, then it finally worked and they finally got some benefit. But generally what we find is that if they put ginger up against a medical pharmaceutical anti-nausea medicine, the pharmaceutical generally works out all by itself. But if you add ginger to what's considered medicines that are not very good at controlling chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting, like compazine and Reglan, the ginger seems to add something to that. The other thing that may be why the evidence on ginger and chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting is a bit conflicting is that it might work better with some chemotherapies than others. There's been a study that shows that it works pretty well with cyclophosphamide and doxorubicin, so that's often a breast cancer treatment, but doesn't work so well with 5-FU. But I'm going to show you a tea later on that taken all day long in a small dose is useful, I think is useful for feeling better, making your tummy feel better in general. So you might try ginger tea if you're in that situation. Cinnamon is, we put that in our soup here. It's one of the things I think that makes it Moroccan in a sense. The turmeric and the cumin could just be an Indian spice, but that cinnamon kind of makes it go a little bit more Mid-Eastern. And just like so many of the other herbs and spices that we could talk about, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, many of the herbs and spices we're talking about have antimicrobial action as well, used topically. And then cinnamon has particularly been studied for its helping with blood sugar control, and that may be a benefit where cancer is concerned too. So we know that people that have diabetes have more colon cancer, may have more breast cancer. So good blood sugar control would be important for those people in cancer treatment or preventing cancer recurrence, to get good control of their blood sugar. And cinnamon may be something that could be added in as helpful. In some studies, the original study was done in Pakistan, where it showed that it reduced blood sugar levels and cholesterol and triglyceride levels. Some of the studies following that have not been able to reproduce that good effect. But it might be a useful adjunct, and maybe once again in the kind of culinary use of cinnamon. The first Pakistan study, it was about a half a teaspoon. The amount of cinnamon that they used were about a half a teaspoon a day. Now that still is a lot of cinnamon. You know, when I first read that study, I thought this is going to be great for my patients with diabetes. I jumped up the next morning, threw a half a teaspoon of cinnamon in my oatmeal and gagged a bit. That's a lot of cinnamon for a single dish, but it's more in the line of a culinary amount than many of the amounts that are used in traditional medicinals, where they use, or in some of our more modern studies where they use very concentrated amounts of powder in capsules in order to get that effect. I gave you a recipe that you might want to try it. Because I was worried about making this soup when it was so hot. I guess I needn't have worried. But I have made that cherry chocolate smoothie in cooking demonstrations before, but I don't think I've ever made that top one, that spiced strawberry smoothie. So that smoothie has both cinnamon and ginger in it. So the combination anti-inflammatory. So even though you couldn't get down maybe a half a teaspoon of cinnamon, you get both those anti-inflammatory, antioxidant spices, and maybe some blood sugar lowering effect of that amount of cinnamon in a smoothie with strawberries. The recipe called for a cup of water. I should have altered that. So I often use an unsweetened vanilla almond milk with it. Not that almond milk is so healthy for you in any way. Those of you who've been in my classes before know that I think almond milk is white colored water that's good for people who are lactose intolerant or trying to keep their calories down, or it's a liquid calcium supplement, but it does not have the protein content of regular cow's milk. But in order to make this smoothie taste sweeter, using unsweetened vanilla almond milk will make it taste sweeter. And then the protein in it are with the good anti-inflammatory, heart-healthy oils from walnuts and almonds, and then flaxseed, which also will help keep you regular. Remember, it's got to be ground. Don't throw whole flaxseed in there. It'll come out the way it went in. And then frozen strawberries. And then there's the cinnamon and the ginger. I recommend that you make this one time without the spinach, just so you can see how it tastes. The avocado makes it taste creamy. So I made this recipe so that it would be a vegan recipe, right? So the avocado makes it taste creamy without the addition of a full fat milk or something. It gives it quite a creamy back. It also raises the calories. If you don't want the calories, you can leave it out. When I make this in a cooking demonstration, people say, gee, that would be great if it had a tablespoon of honey in it. I think it tastes like strawberry jam on graham crackers. So when we get to the Q&A, I'll ask if anybody was able to make that. But there's another good way to get in a couple of good spices that could have tonic benefit for you. Now, we've been talking about spices all this time. And if you see at the bottom of our lentil soup recipe, it calls for cilantro, which is an herb, right? Which is that green leaf. I'm going to step away from, I don't know if you'll be able to hear me. I'm going to go away from that mic a little bit and turn down our soup. I don't know if you can see in that little tiny area. It's bubbling away here. So I'm going to just step away for a minute and get a fork. Okay, you should never leave your guests alone in the living room. I'm going to see if I can get a cauliflower out here and test it. So it's just crisp tender. So I think we'll let it go for another 5 minutes or so. And we've got a little bit more time to talk. So I don't usually add the cilantro to this recipe. And one of the reasons why is because it seems like everything's got cilantro in it. Some people don't like cilantro. When I first ate things with cilantro in them, I thought it tasted like soap. So I kind of appreciate a dish that tastes good without cilantro. I almost always make this without adding the cilantro to it. Sometimes I put chopped cilantro on top for a garnish, and we'll do that. But that is kind of a good segue to talk about green herbs. All these green herbs, all those all the way down to mint, are all in the mint family. And then there's the cilantro and the dill and the parsley and caraway is not on there, that are in the carrot family. So once again, they all have a lot of the same properties of all the herbs and spices that we're talking about. But one of the things I think that's interesting is those top herbs are, we might consider Mediterranean herbs. And there was, National Geographic supported this fellow, Dan Buettner, to go around to the areas of the world where more people live to be over 100 than in other areas of the world. 2 of them are in the Mediterranean, Icaria, Greece, and Sardinia, Italy. One of them's in Okinawa, Japan. One of them's in Costa Rica. One of them's in Loma Linda, California, where there's a large proportion of Seventh-day Adventists live, who generally eat religious, because of religious prescriptions, an ovo-lacto-vegetarian diet, and tend to live 5 to 7 years longer than the typical Californian. A strong faith is part of what's going on with them, and they also exercise, so that may be a factor as well. But in going around to these blue zone areas, in Icaria, Greece, one of the things, and I saw this in a video, which was kind of cool, this woman walking down her outdoor stairway there, and you can see those pots of herbs, mint, sage, and thyme, and in a different time of day, she just grabs up a handful of each and puts them in a cup of boiling water and makes a tea. And in fact, when one of the Greek universities, studied this area, they decided that these foods that were included in the diet were part of the reason why more people there live to be over 100 than in other areas of the world. And, wine is talked about a lot. Olive oil is talked about a lot in the Mediterranean diet. And very less often is talked the idea that they use a large amount of herbs, and not just in their cooking, but in tea drinking as well, often making these simple teas out of just a handful of fresh herbs in hot water, drinking them all day long. So, one of the things that, one of the studies that I saw over the past years was this study, just looking at, well, does taking a teaspoon and a half of herbs, like you're going to get in a pretty good serving of herbs and spices of this dish, especially if you put the cilantro in it, does that matter? So this is a study, and I think your slides have a different study on it, but this is a study just looking at feeding people just one meal study. Like if you give them a really kind of a bad meal, a high fat meal with sugar in it, and you give them basically 6 grams of herbs, which is about a teaspoon and a half to a tablespoon, depending on if they were dried or what they were in that meal, that it actually, in compared to the people that didn't get the herbs, greatly reduces the inflammatory markers after that meal, just in that one meal. So I think that tells us that the culinary use of herbs, even though it isn't that very high dose that people are looking at as an adjunct to cancer treatment, but the culinary use of herbs, this smaller amount of herbs as a vegetable, basically, actually could have a big impact on us. I'm going to walk away again here. My voice might get echoey as I turn this down again a little bit. So let me look at the time and see. So I'm going to go ahead and put the spinach in. This is the thing I failed to do when I did this class at Cancer Support Communities. Let's see if I just completely overload my skillet here. I'll be sorry, because I'll have staining turmeric all over everything. Oh, I'm making it, I'm managing it. So you've got a 1-pot meal here. Look how beautiful that is. I'm going to turn this off now. My skillet off, because I would love for that spinach to stay beautiful and green. And we're going to finish it with a couple of tablespoons of lemon, which just brighten the flavor of this soup all the way along. I have forgotten that before too, and it still makes a beautiful, beautiful dish. So I'm just going to let that sit there for a minute. And I'm going to come back over here. Oh, I forgot to show you that screen big. I'll show you what that looks like on the big screen there. So there's our beautiful one pot meal with our bright green spinach in it. So let me go back just to finish up my slides there. So this is a little pots of herbs in my backyard there. So you can grow your own herbs anywhere, right? You don't have to have a fancy garden to do it. You can grow them in pots. So one of the things about most of those green Mediterranean herbs is that they're strongly antioxidant. And one of the interesting uses for them is in marinating meat. You know, this is summer and people are grilling, and the blackening and cooking meat, fish, poultry at very high heat forms some chemicals that are carcinogenic. And when you marinate meat for at least 30 minutes before you grill it, it greatly decreases the formation of those. And in one study, looking at the addition of those Mediterranean herbs also greatly helped, probably because of their antioxidant capacity. So there's a picture from my garden again. There's oregano, Greek oregano. There's many different types of oregano: Italian oregano, Greek oregano, Mexican oregano, which is from a slightly different species. And actually Mexican oregano, in one of the studies of looking at antioxidant capacity, turned out to be the highest in antioxidant capacity. So there's a marinade recipe that's delicious on fish. You could use it on anything in order to, you know, our use of oregano there, not just as a tonic herb, but maybe to decrease the formation of carcinogenic substances when we grill meat. And I've been talking about sort of the use of small amounts of herbs, you know, teaspoon amounts of herbs in our cooking. But, you know, I don't know if any of you have ever made recipes. I started doing this about 10 years ago, sort of learned. I went to a potluck where my girlfriend had made a salad where the lettuce was flat leaf parsley. It was flat, it was all homegrown, flat leaf parsley, homegrown delicious tomatoes, and I think there was red onion and a lemon juice and olive oil dressing on it. And it was delicious and so interesting. The flat leaf parsley was so bright in it as the lettuce kind of. And so you can make salads, especially with enough green herb in them to be a serving of lettuce. So here's one from New York Times, just as maybe as a motivation to you to make a salad with that much herb. And since we're talking about green herbs that have a lot of antioxidant capacity, mint is another one of those things that shows up high on the antioxidant rating. And, you know, it has mint is used mostly for gastrointestinal discomforts and as an anti-inflammatory where bowel problems are concerned. And interestingly, used as an aromatherapy for vomiting in pregnant women, and in some cases, in some studies for chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting, showing that putting a couple of drops under your nose can decrease nausea and vomiting. Several drops in a cup of water taken several times a day can do it. Or you can do peppermint tea, just like the woman from Icaria grabbing a handful of mint and drinking it. One of the things about peppermint, the other thing that it does do is that it relaxes. It can relax esophageal spasm. And it also relaxes the lower esophageal sphincter pressure in your stomach. So if you're susceptible to heartburn, then peppermint might increase your heartburn. If you've got reflux, it might increase your reflux. Peppermint has a lot more menthol in it than spearmint does. So I don't know if you can see in my garden there, on this side, on the left-hand side, that's peppermint. That leaf looks a little different than spearmint. Spearmint has menthol in it too, which is the active ingredient, but it's got quite a bit less. And one of my favorite teas to recommend to people for just that sort of gentle herbal, sort of tonic, low-level control, just making your tummy feel better, is Celestial Seasoning Sleepy Time Tea. It's got spearmint in it and chamomile. Chamomile is an herb that's known to be stomach soothing. So it doesn't have so much menthol that I think it increases that sense of acid reflux or heartburn. And a lot of people will drink that, including me, will drink that hot or at room temperature if you want to put a little sweetener in it. it's the kind of thing that you could drink all day long and maybe relieve that problem in your stomach if you've got it from treatment, or if you just have it from what my mom would call dietary indiscretion, which means you ate a bunch of stuff you shouldn't eat. One more thing to show you. I'm a big believer in food, and I like this topic of herbs and spices in a culinary sense and using them as tonics, right? That you would use lots of herbs and spices in your food, and that everyday consistent low-level intake of these beneficial herbs and spices strengthens and supports your body and reduces the risk of recurrence or of progression or of getting cancer in the first place. There is a pill form, though. Those of you who've been in my classes might have heard me talk about this before. It's a product by New Chapter called Xiflamin. There's the ingredients on the left-hand side, so you can see that it's a lot like a cross between an Italian and an Indian meal, and with some green tea in it too. We know that it has very strong anti-inflammatory properties. And there's been some a couple of case control studies in it with men with prostate cancer, showing that it reduced PSA level in one case. In another case, another trial with men that had the precursor cancer cells in their prostate, showing that the men who took Xiflamin reduced their PSA. So if you won't go my route and season your food, there's a possibility for you in an herbal supplement. So I think that's it for the slides. Let me just double check that. I'm gonna rush through a little bit because I'm trying to make sure I get to a Q&A here. Time. Yes. So we're back to our beautiful table. So everything's really well cooked. So if you were at my house for dinner, I would serve you a bowl of this beautiful soup, keeping that nice green spinach on the top there. And one of the ways that you could use cilantro, so here's some chopped up cilantro. Here's cilantro in a little vase here. But if you didn't have that nice green spinach on the top of your soup, you could green up the top with a little cilantro and give it a little burst of flavor. And then with this, I often serve, there's something about that Moroccan, Mediterranean, Mideastern sort of flavor with it. I think yogurt goes with it really well. So there's a kind of dessert that I would serve with it. This is fresh peaches. And this happens to be a Siggy's vanilla yogurt. They put very little sugar in their yogurts with some fresh raspberries. And on top of that is a little bit of mint. You can put thyme or basil on this. Thyme goes beautifully with raspberries. Basil is delicious with peaches and raspberries. If you ever make grilled peaches, which I wouldn't do with fresh, delicious peaches, I would do that with peaches that were not quite ripe. Grilled peaches and with some mascarpone cheese and basil, that's a delicious dessert. So there's our beautiful spiced lentil soup. And we've got a few more herbs on our dessert there. So